Before we can say whether a government has lost its ability to effectively operate and meet the needs of its population, we have to agree on what a government's role is, what its responsibilities are, and where it secures its authority. Staying with Anglo-American history, we can cite the Magna Carta as one of the first documents where the people compelled the government, or the king, to sign a contract that gave him specific powers over the people but ensured the people maintained certain rights. The great English philosopher John Locke believed there was no purpose for a government until the people gave it authority. Tying government to social liberty, Locke believed the government was a contract with its people, and that it was this contract that gave the government the authority to rule. However, he made it clear that the government's purpose was to ensure man did not make violence against one another. Locke stated that a civil society provided three things absent from nature but sought after by people. These are law, known and indifferent judges, and authority or power to support the enforcement of law. Locke defended his premise of government hegemony over the natural rights of people by qualifying government's authority in that it had to act in the best interest of the people. As soon as it did not, it was the right of the people to dissolve that government. Moving to our Constitution, the preamble clearly states the purpose of the United States government is to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. Our Constitution is a contract between the people of the United States and our leaders in which we give them the authority to lead, and they provide us with liberty and security. Now that we have established that it is the people that give government its authority in the form of a contract, and that the contract is what gives the government its responsibilities, and most importantly, following Locke's philosophy, when a government should be abolished. Now let's look at the problem of scale and how it factors into a government's ability to effectively operate and meet the needs of its population. It can be said that Western civilization's early governments depended on three things to effectively operate and meet the needs of its population. They were first, the ability to communicate in the form of transporting goods and messaging. Second, security. And third, allowing some level of freedom and capitalism. When a government lost any of the three abilities, they failed and their people suffered. Before I go further, I want to clarify that I understand the ability of a civilization to survive is more complicated than what I am portraying. But I will argue that the basic fundamentals of providing to the needs of the people are based on these three elements. When the Roman Empire was primarily located in what is now Western Europe, Rome attempted to solve the communication problem by building roads throughout the empire. However, once the empire expanded east through Asia Minor, it was decided that it was too large for one person to rule. In other words, it was failing to operate effectively and was unable to provide the basic needs of its people. In AD 284, the Roman Empire was divided into the Western and Eastern empires, each ruled by separate emperors. This division allowed each empire to effectively rule and provide the basic needs of the Roman citizen for another 200 years for the Western Empire and another 500 years for the East. Now, Rome always allowed a certain level of freedom and capitalism, but eventually fell because it could not provide security from invasion. During the Dark Ages, kingdoms rose and fell, mostly because they could not provide security. Of the other two requirements, most kingdoms were not large enough to be affected by distance, and freedom and capitalism was minimalized. The Age of Enlightenment changed all this. It was then, when empires once again grew in size and population, that the problem of communication was encountered again. By the time of the American Revolution, communication technology was identical to that of ancient Rome. Horsepower and walking were the primary sources of road movement, and sail was used on the high seas. The British government, failed to provide American colonists the freedom they desired, and transportation and communications technology did not allow the British government the ability to provide security. The size and location of the colonies hampered not only communication, but also troop movement, with information taking up to 4 weeks to go from London to New York. Additionally, the primitive road network did not allow for effective north-south communications, again hampering internal security operations and communications. Moving forward to the Napoleonic era, France eventually fell because it was unable to provide security for its people. However, the French instituted an interesting methodology in an attempt to solve the communication problem by building a series of semaphore stations throughout France. The French government used the stations to transmit short messages much faster than any horse could. If the weather cooperated, a message could be sent 120 miles in 1 hour. After the fall of Napoleon, it could be said that the ability of government to effectively serve its people should have been easier. External threats to security never diminished, but seldom were they in the form of the destruction of a civilization. Wars usually ended with surrender and state survival. Freedoms in Europe and America expanded, and communication technology advanced. The years between 1820 and 1914 saw the invention of the steam engine, the telegraph, the wireless radios, greatly assisting people and governments to communicate. These inventions allowed for the railroad, transatlantic cabling, a modern road network, and the building of the Suez and Panama Canals, all of which eased communication challenges that burdened earlier governments. Today, governments are in a much better position to meet the needs of its people. Freedoms are greater than at any time in history. Communications are faster, more efficient, and more reliable than ever before. And governments are able to provide better and more effective security through economic reliance, weapons and intelligence technology, alliances, and unfortunately, the threat of mutually assured destruction. It can be argued that the greatest threat to the ability of a government to effectively operate and meet the needs of its population is the fact that they are becoming a bloated, money-hungry socialist bureaucracy that feeds on itself by growing beyond the ability of its people to support it. Once this takes root, it is proven that a government will be unable to provide internal security and will fall into a period of civil unrest. And as John Locke said 400 years ago, when a government fails to meet the needs of the people, it is the right of the people to dissolve it. Thank you.